comedy flops of the 2012-2013 season. All right, so going into the season, the previous season had been a great time for comedy on broadcast TV. Okay, you had a bunch of hit new comedies like Two Broke Girls and New Girl, and you had some established comedies that were already hits like Modern Family and The Big Bang Theory that had seen substantial growth themselves. And networks noticed this, and they invested heavily in comedy the next season. They had extra blocks planned out, or a bunch of new shows, and what happened was a disaster. It's a comedy disaster. There are only two broadcast comedies that make it out of this season renewed: The Neighbors on ABC and The Mindy Project on Fox. Neither of those shows were legitimate hits. They were borderline shows, and neither of them would make it to 4 seasons on an actual broadcast network. Right? And so basically there was around an 85% fail rate for these new comedies. So let's look at them. So a couple things first. Ratings caveat. During this time, the average rating in the 2012-13 TV season for a Big Four show was around a 2.1. Right? So when we're looking into this, right, in general, for renewal and cancellation purposes, if you're above a 2, you're probably going to get renewed. If you're below a 2, you're probably going to get canceled, unless there's some other circumstances at play. The other thing is when we're talking about failed shows, and I'm going to go from the highest to lowest rated of the comedies that got canceled, I have to put in a burn-off caveat. Okay? During this period of time, sometimes when network canceled a show, they pulled it from the air. Okay? Sometimes they cancel a show, they let it air out some more episodes. Sometimes they pull the show, and then in the summer, they would burn it off. Right? So when I have these ratings averages, if there was a burn off, I included the burn off. But for some of these shows, like the first one, Partners, it got pulled after 6 episodes. So if it had to air those last 7 episodes in any circumstance besides where it was in, it would have lowered its average. All right, so very first flop, Partners. All right, this is a CBS comedy, and it was placed between How I Met Your Mother and Two Broke Girls. Okay, and this was the time slot that Two Broke Girls had done really well with the previous year. So the time slot is Monday at 8:30. It's going to average a 2.07, with its high being a 2.4 for the series premiere. And then in the second to last episode, it got a 1.8. And that's what's going to get it pulled. Now, that's a higher ratings average than the 2 comedies that did get renewed. But you have to consider the context here. Okay? Both How I Met Your Mother and Two Broke Girls are playing into the 3s. And this show is scraping at the edge of the 2s into the 1s. And they replaced it afterwards with reruns of The Big Bang Theory that did substantially better, and they boosted the night. So last year in this time slot, Two Broke Girls averaged over a 4. This time, just 6 episodes in, it was barely doing a 2. Right? It didn't have to be Two Broke Girls big to be a success. But given the context, it was not a successful show. The next one is Go On. And this is sad, given the fact that Matthew Perry just died, and I was a fan of the show while it was airing. All right, so this is the final season of The Office, and 30 Rock and NBC is really trying to replenish its comedy brand. All right, so they bet on one of their old comedy stars, Matthew Perry, and this thing got mountains of promotion, especially during the Olympics. All right, so its time slot originally is Tuesday at 9 p.m. And then it will air its last 2 episodes Thursday at 9:30. So NBC gives Go On this giant push. And then they even have it air immediately after the Olympics. Okay, and so for that episode, and a really big rating of 5.6. Then they had it start early. Okay, it started on September 11th, and it aired right after the results show of The Voice. And so for its first 2 weeks, it's going to get a 3.4. So that's really solid. The Voice is playing into the fours, but that's still a really solid number. Once it has some competition from the regular season programming, it's going to settle into the mid twos, which again, it has a good lead in, but this is pretty solid performance. But then The Voice goes away. And again, the show had never gone below a 2. And they have it air on its own in January. And it returns to a 1.5. Okay, just comes crashing down on a third below where it had been before. It recovered a little bit to a 1.7 the next week, then it crashed down to a 1.3, and it just kept on getting lower until the week before The Voice came back, it did a 1. And so it basically lost over half its audience when it has to stand on its own. It aired one episode, the one in which Courtney Cox guest starred. After The Voice, it shot back up to a 1.9, which was a lot better than it had been doing, but still not great. And then they aired the last 2 episodes after The Office, and they were very low ones. And NBC ends up canceling it. And I'm kind of surprised it was canceled in a way that like NBC didn't even try to save face with this show. But it was one of those things where it did well when given the right circumstances, but when asked to stand on its own, it just completely collapsed. Okay, so the ratings were somewhat fraudulent. Okay, our next one is How to Live with Your Parents for the Rest of Your Life. This is a show on ABC. Now, ABC during this period of time is going to get a bit of notoriety for its new comedies having terrible names. Okay? And this is another good example of it. It's a giant mouthful. But the premise is still apparent in the setup here. So, this launched in the spring and it aired Wednesday at 9:30 after Modern Family. So its rating average is going to be a 1.76. Its high is a 2.9. Its low is a 0.9. So it's going to premiere to a 2.9. And Modern Family is a 4.2 that night. So solid opening for it. And when Modern Family is new, it's going to stay above that 2 rating. But when Modern Family is a rerun, it's going to drop into the 1s. So then it got canceled right after the season was over. But ABC kept on airing it where it was at. So it aired after Modern Family reruns into the summer. And those aren't really a terrible lead-in for something for this type of burn-off, but it would still was below a tenth or so from the Modern Family reruns. So its last episode aired right before the 4th of July, and it dropped below a 1. So it's one of those things where I don't know what the heck ABC was expecting of this show, given how it was scheduled. Like it did solidly after Modern Family. And maybe that was a little bit fraudulent, but they didn't really have any proof of that, and then they canceled it at that point. So it kind of seems like they decided they weren't going to renew the show even before it aired. Though then why did you waste Modern Family on it? All right, so the show that was paired with Go On was called The New Normal. Right, and so this is a show about a gay couple who have a woman as their surrogate. Okay. And it was trying to do all sorts of social comedy and commentary. Right. And so this aired after Go On, so it was a lot less safe of a proposition, airing Tuesdays at 9:30. Rating average is a 1.55. All right, so it premiered, its first episode previewed after The Voice itself. Then it was after Go On. It usually was dropping about 15-20% out of Go On during the fall. Okay? Nothing to write home about, but perfectly acceptable. And then this basically continued in the winter as Go On was crashing. Okay? When Go On went from getting in the twos, right, low twos, and this would be high ones, then Go On's in the mid ones, so it's in the low ones. And it just gets so bad at the end. When Go On did its one, the new normal got a 0.7. And again, this is at a point in which the average show is getting about a 2.1. So that last episode before The Voice came back, it is into just mega flop territory. So really no redeeming that you can do with it. Right? It has the same ratings trajectory as Go On, just with a little lower level. All right, the next one is Malibu Country. So, last time we talked about successful new shows, we had Last Man Standing, okay, which was basically a gender flipped version of Home Improvement with Tim Allen. That had started really well for ABC the previous year, but dropped a lot in the spring. And it doesn't really fit with most of what was on ABC, live studio audience, multi camera comedy. So they decide something that's actually perfect for it. Okay, they're going to give Reba a new show. Reba's show was very successful on WB and the CW. And so this is going to be on Fridays at 8:30. And normally that's not a great time slot, but it's going to be paired with Last Man Standing. And they even aired the CMA Awards on a Thursday that year. So it would be the day before this when it was aired. So they waited till November. Right? They won the optimal audience. And it premieres great. Last Man Standing returns to a 2. Malibu Country does a 2.3. So it grows out of Last Man Standing. Then the next week, it just holds all of Last Man Standing. And then by that point, for the rest of the run, it basically loses a 10th out of Last Man Standing. So its average is a 1.39. And I wouldn't consider the show an actual failure. Okay? It did slightly worse than Last Man Standing on a Friday night. It was rather cheap to make, airing out of it. And we're going to see the next year when they air The Neighbors after The Last Man Standing, they're going to do significantly worse than Malibu Country. So honestly, I think ABC probably should have renewed this. And it probably could have gone on 4 years, airing after Last Man Standing in a not very noteworthy run. But it just shows how catastrophic this year was for comedy. Everything was failing. Okay? Guys with kids. So we have this guys with kids. Okay? And this was a multi-camera comedy, right? Something that would fit better really alongside like Malibu Country that we were just showing. Right? And so we have Guys with Kids, and it has a preview after the finale of America's Got Talent, where it is a 2.2, and then it airs Wednesday, 8:30 p.m. And its average is a 1.36, which isn't a great average. I think it's as low as a 1. Now, at the beginning of its run, it's airing after a show called Animal Practice. We'll get there in a moment. And it grew out of Animal Practice for the first couple weeks. They both weren't doing very well, but it was growing out of its lead-in. So, in November, Animal Practice is subbed out for season 2 of Whitney. another multi-camera show, and Guys with Kids basically holds its lead-in from Whitney, or does a tiny bit worse for the rest of its run. Now, at the end of it, both Whitney and Guys with Kids get canceled, as NBC just gives up on this Wednesday comedy block. Right. And so it's another thing where it given a different position, the show may have been able to do better, but it really, besides those first couple weeks, never showed that it could rise above its circumstances. Okay, so Ben and Kate is a very interesting show because it was airing on Tuesdays for Fox between Raising Hope and New Girl. Okay, and it stars a before she is famous Dakota Johnson. She's famous for the 50 Shades of Grey movies. She's in this network sitcom here. So averages a 1.34. It premiered to 2.1 because on that night, Fox aired New Girl at 8 and 9. So it was between two episodes of New Girl. They both do a 2.8, so it's dropping between them. And then it's airing after Raising Hope, which isn't much of a lead-in, but it's dropping about 20%. And then in January, they actually ended up pulling it before its last episode's air. And so it was one of those things where it really wasn't doing that much worse than the Mindy Project, given the circumstances at the same time. But Fox clearly cared more about the Mindy Project and did things to kind of defend it. Something that does not occur with Ben and Kate. Okay, this is Animal Practice, but was known on the internet as a meme of Monkey Doctor. Right, and so Monkey Doctor or Animal Practice is only behind Go On in the amount of promotion of a show is getting on the Olympics. And it airs its sneak peek premiere after the closing ceremony of the Olympics. And it does a 4.1, which is significantly behind the 5.6 that was done by Go On in similar circumstances. Then it premieres on its own Wednesday at 8 p.m. and those did it switch, and it does a 1.4. Gets as low as a 1.1 before it is pulled. At the end of October, its episodes never get burned off. It was replaced by Whitney. And now is remembered mostly as a meme of Monkey Doctor. The next one is 1600 Penn, which is a show that I quite enjoyed when it was on the air. And it stars a pre-Frozen Josh Gad. Okay, this is literally going to be airing months before Josh Gad is Olaf in Frozen. Something that, a network could have tried to capitalize on. But this is before. And so the premise is it's in the White House. Right? And the president has this doofus son and a bunch of other shenanigans. So this aired Thursday at 9:30. It aired after the final run of The Office. And its average is going to be a 1.11. So it does get a special preview airing after The Voice in December, and then it airs after The Office. And it is dropping about 40% out of The Office. And then for the last 4 episodes, they air it at 8:30 and 9:30 based around reruns. So it plummets for its last episode, only doing a 0.7. So it gets canceled. I was kind of bummed out about this when it happened at the time. But if you look at the ratings, you really can't argue that this show deserved better because they did give it The Office. The last bit of The Office is a lead-in. Okay, Family Tools. This is the show that was basically pre-canceled. Okay? They made it seem like it had a chance. It didn't have a chance. And the reason you know this is the show debuted May 1st, 2013. Right? So it aired the last 4 Wednesdays of the television season. Now, the time slot, Wednesday, 8:30. This is between The Middle and Modern Family. So in theory, that's actually a pretty good time slot. However, that's only for 4 weeks. So it debuted at a 1.5. It hung out around a 1.2 for those remaining weeks. And then ABC canceled it. But they let it air the remainder of its episodes in the summer. And those were airing after reruns in the middle. And it was dropping from the middle. So just like How to Live with Your Parents the Rest of Your Life, its final episode aired right before the 4th of July, around reruns, dropping all the way to a 0.6. So this is not a show that had a chance. The network canceled it before it aired. Right? Like, well, I don't know what ABC would have done if it had actually shown promise for this there. And the last one, and I wasn't sure if I was going to include this one because technically it debuted on the first day of summer, but this was supposed to be a show that was going to air in the regular season. And this is another one of those things that were pre-canceled. Okay, so this is Save Me. Okay, and this is a sitcom that originally had a 13 episode order, but NBC had already cut it to 7 episodes. So this did get some promotion during the finale of The Office, but it was airing Thursday, 8 p.m. It averaged a mere 0.64. Its season high was a 0.7. Its low was a 0.5. Okay? NBC knew this was a total dud, and they treated it likewise. So, just a catastrophic year for comedy. Right? Nothing that is going to have a long-term impact airs. The ones that do get renewed are a stretch. And it really sucks because the networks were correct to try to bet big on comedy, and it just all gets squandered. So next time, we'll talk about drama during this time. So I hope you liked it. Do you remember any of these comedies? Do you remember them fondly? What do you think of how things played out during this television season?